Hey, welcome to TechRadar. I'm Matt Swider, Global Managing Editor of TechRadar.com.
And I'm Matt Phillips, TechRadar's video producer. And yesterday we got Apple's WWDC 2020 conference. And so I had to grab Matt on camera and chat to him all about it and ask him all the questions that maybe you're thinking of as well at home. But before we get into the kind of details of the conference itself, Matt, this was obviously a bit of a different take on WWDC. Obviously, I know you've been to a few of them before. So what did you think of the overall production of this year's event and obviously having to shoot it from home and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it went very smoothly for Apple. Live blogging this event, usually the problem is not having a strong Wi-Fi connection when we're kind of rolling out updates in real time. That wasn't a problem because I was working from home. But the issue was there was no applause stoppages. And so it made live blocking exceptionally difficult.
Right, okay. Because usually you're taking those breaks as a bit of relaxation for you and also to type up.
It was strange. We were all live streaming a pre-recorded video. That was recorded at Apple's campus, Apple Park. But it went smoothly for Apple, so that's good. And they had a lot to show. No hardware, but software, starting with iOS 14.
Exactly. So let's get into that then. So I think probably the thing they opened with for iOS 14 and probably one of the big features is the app library. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how it's going to help us be more organized, I guess, with our iPhones?
Right. So that was one of the big things, and also widgets. And it really goes after what I've loved about Android. And why I sometimes switch to Android, and I really have wanted this feature on iOS for a long time. It's finally here. So something like the app drawer that Google uses on Android phones is kind of what Apple's doing. It'll automatically sort things that kind of go together. So your Apple Arcade games will appear in a siloed little folder. So it's kind of smart. I'm looking forward to testing it. Probably waiting until the public beta comes out. I may, dive into the developer beta to kind of see what's what, but do a deep dive in that public beta that everybody should download in July to see how it better organizes my screen. Because I'm thumbing through many window panes on iOS 13 currently, and it's been a little bit disorganized. I would love the ability to have a better understanding of where my transportation apps are for when I eventually go outside after quarantine, and make sure that it's within a thumb's reach, and the muscle memory is there for getting to the apps I want with the app library. So I'm kind of interested in seeing how smart it is to automatically group the apps together that I want.
That's what piqued my interest as well. Sorry, my top 10 most used apps, I know exactly where they are, right? They're not even well organized. I just know where they are from muscle memory. So it'll be really interesting to see. Everything else I just search for, right? You swipe down and you use the search bar. So it'll be really interesting to see if I can just go to that now third page or however you want to set it up, and it'll know what I already want before I even know what I want. That's what I'm excited to see.
That's the dream right there. And I'm just like you. I search for these apps when it's not within the first two window panes. And really that shouldn't be. I should really have a better understanding of where my apps are and have it better organized. I would love the ability to skip spaces, but we'll see if that is possible, and have transportation apps on one pane, and then Facebook and social media apps on a different one. But maybe this is the remedy that Apple is coming out with that will kind of bridge that gap and come up with a decent solution.
And I think they had to come up with some sort of solution, because them obviously adding widgets in, which we'll get to now, is taking up more screen real estate, right? So you have less space for those apps. So you're going to have less apps on each page because you're going to have widgets there instead. So tell us a little bit about widgets and why we should be excited for widgets.
That's true. That's a really good point, because the widgets are going to take up extra space. Probably the thing I'm looking forward to the most, having the weather there and the 5-day forecast at a glance, instead of having to open up the weather app every single time I want to see, it's going to rain on Saturday. Like I want to know that maybe on the spot when I'm looking at my phone. It's what I really appreciate about the Apple Watch, is that it has these things called they call them glanceable information or complications. So I really like that aspect of I get to see, sunrise is at 8:31, or that would be sunset.
I was gonna say,
yeah. I was like, wow, that's a late. But like I can see that while I'm checking the time.
yeah,
So if I want to do, I sometimes, on my own time, I do time lapses, and I really like doing that.
yeah.
And if I'm going to get to a spot in New York City to take a time lapse, I kind of want to know that information, but I'll see that periodically throughout the day and kind of remind myself, okay, I have to wind down work at this time to make sure I get out there and do a cool time lapse. Like having that type of information on your iPhone is just going to be a game changer. And
yeah, and again, another sort of point they harped on with that was that these are going to be smart as well, right? Or you're going to have the option to make them smart. So it will hopefully predict, Matt Swider's going to be looking for sunset times around about now, so I'm going to give him that information, and later on I'll give him his 5 p.m. meeting information or whatever it is. But again, it's relying on that system to be smart, and there's always a bit of a question of whether or not it will be that smart.
That's really the debate, and they call it smart stacks. And
yeah.
So when you want that relevant information, say you're at the gym and you usually play Apple Music at the gym, it'll kind of come to the forefront of this smart stack of different apps or widgets, app widgets on like this layer.
Yeah.
So it'll come to the forefront. That's great, but I'm wondering, will I rely on that, or will I just say, you know what, I'm just going to do this manually and have a bunch of different widgets at my own discretion. So I'm interested in seeing if Apple is smart enough to really predict that type of stuff for that scenario at the gym or a different scenario. So it's
difficult, isn't it? Because when it works well, you're not going to notice it working well, but when it's not working well, you're going to be annoyed by it, right? So it's difficult to catch that balance, I think. But it'll be interesting to see.
That's always the case with software.
Yeah, exactly.
The other one is like workouts. Like they're not the workout app, but the activity app. So when I'm going to miss my standing goal or going to miss, it's towards the end of the day, I want to see that activity app to remind myself, I got to get out there. I got to start moving. So that's really what I want from this glanceable information. I never open up that activity app. I kind of glance at it at my watch, but it's kind of small. I want that information to kind of remind myself, I'm going to miss my, completing the 3 rings on my Apple Watch for activity if I don't get out there and start moving. I want that information right away. Yeah. So that's going to be nice.
And have they announced at all or released any information on how it's going to do that sort of smart stuff? Like, is it tracking your location and therefore knows you're at the gym and therefore can give you your music? Is that how it's working? Or is it just purely based on the stuff you repeat over and over again? It's more time-based, I guess.
They said it was based on onboard intelligence.
Who knows then?
That actually means, right. So, but they had a similar idea, not quite this, but they kind of put suggestions. I think they call them Siri suggestions below. It's kind of in the today kind of pane. That's the 0 pane when you kind of swipe left. But it used to be in the multitasking screen when you would double click the home button back on the older iPhones, and it would say, okay, you're at the gym, you're working out. And that's actually the scenario that they originally gave. So yeah, it's something that I'm kind of skeptical of if it's going to be smart enough, but at the same time, I'm hopeful that they get it right this time.
Yeah, and again, a feature that I'm relatively skeptical of, because I'm not sure how exactly it'll work, is picture-in-picture mode. So we saw them demo it in the conference, but I'm not sure they specifically talked about which app they were using for that video, were they?
Yeah, I didn't see because I was busy live blogging. My head was
of course
for a portion of that, but it looks to be a lot like what Android does currently. And
right,
they said you could resize the video and kind of slide it off, but still listen to the audio, which I'm very interested in. I'm hoping it works on YouTube.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. The reason I'm skeptical of it is because that is a premium feature of YouTube, right? Like, to have your YouTube videos playing when your phone's asleep is certainly a premium feature. You have to subscribe to, it is called YouTube Premium now, isn't it? Yeah. To sort of make that work. So whether or not YouTube will get on board with that as a feature, because they're essentially doing themselves out of YouTube Premium subscriptions, I would have thought. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm kind of skeptical of that as well. That's what the new iOS rollouts are. It's like they come out with these features, but we'll see, which ones sink and which ones fly. But I'm kind of thinking that they'll get it right because they've been doing a lot of this on the iPad. So iPad OS has a picture-in-picture functionality, and really the iPhone, being a smaller device, that usually gets it's a second string. It comes on later with these feature ideas, but being able to kind of listen to something while you're navigating the home screen and going to another app is kind of a great thing, especially when you listen to podcasts on YouTube or different TechRadar videos. So
exactly. Send us screenshots of you picturing your TechRadar YouTube video with techradar.com in the background running in Safari.
Right, very meta.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see. And, you talked about it's been on the iPad for a little while, and obviously bringing it to iPhone has a smaller screen, so I wonder how many people will use it. But of course, the latest iPhone, the iPhone SE, is even smaller again. But of course, it will be doable in the iPhone SE, so we'll see how many people want to use that. I don't know. Seems like it would be a bit of a push.
I think so. I don't know if it's for getting the best resolution necessarily, but it's more of like a reference, especially when it comes to podcasts that I do listen to on YouTube. I do like, seeing some facial reactions and so forth. So if you're looking for something like this, it's kind of nice to have that, but it's not mandatory. I don't need, it's not like watching the next Spider-Man movie. I'm not going to be minimizing that, doing other work on my phone at the same time. I'm going to take that in on probably a giant TV. So I, kind of see the functionality more being a reference for picture-in-picture than anything else.
Yeah, exactly. And, talking of sort of apps that you can slide away and hide a little bit, Siri got some updates, which is going to make Siri a little bit more hidden. So when you tell us about that and how important that is to you, I guess, as an iPhone user.
Right. I think it's not very exciting compared to widgets, but it's probably going to make my day-to-day a lot easier when I do pull up Siri more than anything else.
Yeah.
Because having Siri take over the entire screen, there's really no point to it. They unveiled that, and also something during the iPad section that also applies to the iPhone. They said incoming calls will not... Siri always pops up while I say.
Is that what's happening?
Yeah, it's happened twice so far.
Yeah, there we go.
That is always the conundrum of talking about Apple stuff. But the incoming calls, there's no reason that it should in 2020 take over the entire screen. And funny enough, I was in the middle of doing the live blog, and I got 2 spam calls, or what I assume were spam calls, because that's just still a problem in 2020. But I was live blogging, and it was taking over my devices, and it was taking over my Mac, and it was taking over my watch, and all of that was super annoying. But when you're using these devices, it'd be like if it took over my 6 screens that are behind me while I was live blogging for one incoming call. No reason for it. Siri's the same way. It pops up at the bottom, and it's supposed to be smarter. And we're several years on with using Siri. It seems to get smarter every year, but this one is more of a visual change that we're seeing, and it's very welcomed.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. They're always iterating on Siri. It's always getting a little bit smarter. One of the interesting things they did want to highlight in this, though, was the translation features that they're adding or improving upon, and including sort of a conversation mode that I thought was pretty nifty, where they split the screen down the middle and you're talking one language, the other person's talking the other language, and you've kind of both got to look at each screen. But of course, we've seen Google Pixel as well sort of introduce a version of this, or, sort of pioneer a version of this, I guess. The Google Pixel is pretty well renowned for having good translation features. So what do you want to see from that sort of thing to make it keep up with the Google Pixel, I guess?
Right. I think the translation that Google does is good, but I think all the devices are in their infancy.
Yes.
And I'm curious if Apple can actually catch up, mostly because I just feel like Google is a company that has a lot of data, and Apple is so privacy concerned about using and collecting data, and that is noble and good. But do they have access to that data, the swaths of data that are out there, that they're a company that can kind of harness that data and take advantage of it if they're not collecting the data nearly as much. So I am kind of skeptical there too. I want to see Apple do well with having their privacy stance that they have, but they're supposedly going to support 11 languages with this built-in translation feature. Everything happens on device with machine learning and the neural engine. That's very good, but how smart can it get in the future when Google's going to be probably sourcing a lot more data and tweaking it with that data as time goes on? So Apple is coming out with this very promising feature, but long term, what's the roadmap there? Is it just going to pale in comparison to what Google does?
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see. And talking of a feature that other companies already do potentially a little bit better, they made a lot of announcements or showed off a lot of new features that they bring into messages, and the whole time I was like, your WhatsApp already does that, Facebook Messenger already, like groups and pinned messages and all these things that I feel like everybody else does. So is there anything in that section that stood out to you as, oh, this is actually something new and interesting that I will use?
Yeah, when it comes to messages, I think especially in the US, people use the iPhone. We don't use WhatsApp very much.
Sure.
We use it for, everybody says, oh, my one friend who lives somewhere in Europe, I use it for that person.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay, I'm in that same boat. I think at one point, it was a couple of years ago now, but they said WhatsApp has 8% penetration in the US. So we use, when we exchange numbers, and I think this is where Google gets things wrong, no one meets somebody at a networking event or like dating or at a bar or something and says, okay, it's really, really nice talking to you. Can I get your Gmail address?
Yeah.
Like, that's what Hangouts relies on. Not good. So everybody just still exchanges phone numbers in the US. And they do it mostly through an iPhone, or if the person happens to have an Android phone, it has those green bubbles and it feels very disconnected for an iPhone user. So there's been many articles written on that. So Apple coming out with these features late really just doesn't make a difference for a lot of people. They're having better group messages, and then those pin messages that you're talking about, that's going to be really helpful. I do use pin notes in the Notes app. To have like my notes, my daily to-do list at the very top. That's going to be really helpful for really big group conversations that are critical to respond to when you open up the Messages app. So I find that to be really good. And there's going to be like the usual stuff like more emoji stickers. So that's good. But it's really just the group messages and being able to at somebody in the group messages. So. And reply inline and so forth. So I find those to be late to the game, but critical for people who use and rely on messages and iMessages and so forth.
Yeah, and they brought this up a little bit later on, but one of the things that I thought was kind of terrifying in regards to messages was this fact that you will now be able to use your phone as your car key and text that car key to your friends so they can access your car with their phones.
Yeah.
How, why? That sounds like a terrible idea. I don't understand.
I'll give you the scenario using a different device, but I could see it also applying to cars as well.
Yeah.
Rarely, but so convenient. And you can even create a business model out of it. So I've used this for the door lock. I had a smart door lock back in my old place when I was not in New York City, but in California. And it was lovely. It used Bluetooth. It would sit in my pocket, or my phone would sit in my pocket, and the doorknob would be there, or really the deadbolt. And you would just put your finger on it. It would use Bluetooth, and it would know, okay, this is Matt. He has phone within a couple of feet away, and it would automatically unlock the door, based on me just touching the outside of the deadbolt. Super fantastic. Now, say I was out at the store or down. I lived at the beach and I had a friend, say coming to the apartment and dropping their stuff off, but then meeting me down at that store or the beach. I don't want to come all the way back. So I can say, okay, I'm going to give you a temporary access to the apartment. Just throw your stuff in, and then I'll lock up when you're out. Just text me when you're out, and then on your way to the beach. That actually came in handy a couple times.
Sure,
I could see that maybe applying. Say someone drinks too much and says, hey, can you go collect my car? Or someone needs access to the car, or like you could even set up a guest pass for someone who's maybe renting a car from you, or
Yeah.
you're taking turns with a car. Now a lot of Airbnbs use that deadbolt situation, where they're that smart deadbolt where they're having guests unlock something and then changing the guest policy, or
Sure.
changing like a password if it has a key that you can open up. That's all super handy, and people are creating businesses out of it. Kind of do the same thing with this, having your car keys tied to your smartphone. So
Yeah, and I can
privacy concerns
definitely.
there, but
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to come on to. So I can definitely see the advantages of it. My issue is if Matt Swider falls asleep on the beach and somebody nicks his phone, and now they can take his car and drive his car to his apartment where they can let themselves in and steal all your stuff in your own car.
Right. Hopefully, and I think that's a scenario, but hopefully someone will be able to, I'd say, not be able to access your phone. So because you have Face ID,
Sure.
you're able to kind of do that. So
So it would
sorry,
unlock.
Siri popped up again.
That's all right.
Siri
So it would
be part of the
unlock.
conversation.
It would unlock your car in the same way it unlocks your watch, right? Like your watch knows if you've taken your watch off and then locks itself. So it'd be a similar sort of thing, right? You could use Face ID to get into your phone, and then it knows it's you, and then now you can access your car.
That's the hope, right? Because I'm kind of interested in how it detects and authenticates that you are the person with that phone in your pocket.
Yeah,
when
exactly.
You go reach for the handle of that car, and
Yeah.
and doesn't unlock it for somebody else.
And
the other scary thing is,
go on.
if you're jumping into your car to get away from somebody, for example, that's one thing with these automatic. They have this in cars now where the key fob gets close enough.
Yes.
All of a sudden, your doors are open to both yourself and somebody else, and you have to kind of quickly lock it. It kind of changes the muscle memory of what you need to do. So
yeah,
it's little things like that are issues.
Yeah, these are all extreme scenarios, though, like you say. But and it certainly is a very futuristic seeming technology. So
yeah,
we'll see. I can't imagine anybody. Like they've said, right, that it's for the new brand of BMW M5 that's coming out next year. So I would imagine adoption is going to be relatively slow, and we're not going to be
very limited.
Yeah, exactly.
I felt like Apple didn't have any hardware, but they unveiled something else I can't afford. So
brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But sort of in the same line of cars and stuff, they did talk a little bit about their improvements that they've made to Apple Maps. And I've had an iPhone. I think the first iPhone I had was the iPhone 3G. I've got the iPhone X now at 10 now. And Apple Maps is never something I've ever touched because I think it got off to such a rough start. Everybody was talking about how terrible Apple Maps was that I've just always used Google Maps. And it's like the first app you install on a new iPhone is Google Maps because, God forbid, using Apple Maps. So in your experience, has Apple Maps come on leaps and bounds? Is it a serious competitor at this point?
It has, but the bar was very, very, very low. And it was curious. They started that conversation about maps with Apple Maps is the best. And I was like, what? That doesn't sound right. Not that I remember, but they're right. It's just a stretch to say it's the best. It's a lot better. And they're rebuilding it from the ground up. They've said that before too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the UI has definitely improved, and those UI changes, that revamp is coming to the UK, Ireland, and Canada. So that's significant. I think the fact that it works with Siri is really handy, whereas Google Maps does not. So it's kind of hard to say that name. I have to stop saying it because it keeps popping up. But the fact that it works seamlessly with a voice assistant helps me use Apple Maps a little bit more. So I do tend to gravitate towards Google Maps. But if I'm riding, say, a city bike and I want to bring up Maps, one of these rental bikes that are out there, and I have just a subscription to that, and I want to bring up Apple Maps while I'm already getting out the bike, it's just way easier to call up Siri and have directions there. And the other thing that they announced with Apple Maps is the ability to have bicycle directions. Mm-hmm. So when I took out the city bike just 2 weeks ago, I was like, oh, right, I have to choose between getting directions to a store called B&H Photo with either having walking directions or having car directions, and none of them really met my needs.
Sure.
So I was just shocked that bicycle directions were not part of this, but now they're going to be, at least in New York, LA, and they said 5 cities. So we'll see where that happens. But that was the thing that caught me about Apple Maps. It is on Mac OS, but no one's ever opened that program.
Exactly. Why would you? And you're right. They're adding cycling. They're also adding EV transportation, right?
Yes.
So you'll be able to tell it which EV electric vehicle that you have, and it will know how much battery you've got and maintain all that information, I guess, and tell you where to go charge and stuff. Very interesting stuff.
It is. That's where I am also skeptical of their ability to do data collection.
Sure.
Google has a monopoly on that pretty much, where we're always typing things into a search engine, and so they know which points of interest to highlight and which are popular and which people are going to gravitate toward.
Yeah, for sure. And that's basically all of the kind of main points that I'd at least highlighted from iOS 14. Was there anything we didn't cover that you think is worth mentioning?
I think app clips was kind of interesting.
Yes, so I did skip over that, didn't I?
It's something that I don't think will be wildly popular, but when you need it in a jiffy. So you go to Starbucks and you're like, oh, I don't even have the Starbucks app, or I'm running out of space. A lot of people have older iPhones and they're running out of space on their phone, and they don't want to download a dedicated app just to use Starbucks once or twice in the rare case like I have Starbucks. And so you could download a portion of the app. They said it has to be under 10 megabytes in size, but you could just scan the reward stuff or something of that nature without having to download the entire app. I think that's handy. I don't think it's a game changer.
It's going to be interesting. It's like what we've talked about already. It's going to be who adopts this and how do developers use this is going to be the interesting thing, because they can show off all the examples they like, but if in the real world it's not adopted and it's not used by anybody, then it's something and nothing in it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with it.
Yeah, and it's all about speed instead of like, we've all been waiting there where we're like, oh, I don't have this app to this like loyalty program or something like that, or something I want to pay for through an app. And you have to wait for it to download, but it's downloading a tremendous amount of data that you're never going to use. Yeah. So why not just download the Apple clip or the app clip? Kind of a neat idea. Google does that already, but it's something that Apple is catching up on. And that's really what I feel about iOS 14 in general. It's Apple catching up to widgets and app clips and maps and so forth. So and messages. Like a lot of it is what we've been asking for. And usually with these iOS updates, Apple does a lot of good things, but there's certain things I've always had reservations on, and the widgets were a big one, and they're finally here. So it's Apple kind of saying, okay, we've waited long enough to do this. Here's how we're going to do it, and we're going to do it in our way and perfect things. So I'm very interested in that.
Very good. And so it's probably worth us touching on then before we close out here. When can we get it, and what devices will it be available on, I guess, is something we should cover.
Yeah, so Apple, I feel like, has only done this in terms of compatibility once before. So this is the second time where everything that every device that was compatible with iOS 13 will get iOS 14. You'll be able to download that. So iPhone 6 and onward, or iPhone 6S and onward. So if you have the iPhone 6, you'll need to upgrade your device. It's about time. That's really good. But iPhone 6 never got iOS 13. So you're going to be able to kind of get the next upgrade. And usually Apple cuts off one generation. They did this time, and that's a really nice thing. In terms of release date for developers, it's out now. So if you have a paid Apple account, it's $100 to have that. And it's really meant for people to beta test things and submit things to the App Store. That's where that money goes to that platform. But for everybody else, just wait until July. Apple will probably have it. I'm going to guess early July based on prior timings. And then September is usually the date for the final version. So anybody that does download the public beta will have September, as probably the release date, along with the maybe iPhone 12. So we'll see it then.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. Well, thanks for joining me, Matt. Please do let us know in the comments down below what your favorite feature of iOS 14 is going to be, or maybe a feature that you were hoping for that didn't show up at the WWDC conference. I almost got that wrong. Thank you so much for joining me, Matt.
Yeah.
Please do head over to TechRadar. You can read way more about all of this stuff and see all the latest tech news and reviews.